What is up, everybody? This is Scott Melker, your host of the Wolf of Wall Street's podcast, where twice a week I talk to your favorite personalities in the worlds of finance, Bitcoin, crypto, art, music, politics, sports, basically anyone with an interesting story to tell. This show is powered by Blockworks Group, a media company with over 20 podcasts in their network. You can check them out at blockworksgroup.io. If you like the podcast and you follow me on Twitter, you absolutely need to check out my website and join my newsletter, where I share all my trades, charts, analysis, market thoughts, and lessons on improving your trading and investing. You can check all that out at wolfofallstreets.io. So today's guest is a friend of mine who's founded one of the most useful and interesting companies in the crypto space. Joe Vezzani, the CEO of LunarCRUSH, noticed that participants and observers in the crypto space lacked traditional sources to gauge social sentiment in the market. Now with his solution, traders, investors, and developers can better understand the complexities of the crypto space and how social sentiment plays into that. So really, really excited to talk to Joe today. What's up, man? How are you? Thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. That was a great intro. I gotta write that one down.
Hooray. You know, every time I say your name, since I spent like 10 years in Philly, I want to do the Rocky voice, Adrian, like Joe Vezzani, you know, it has that feeling to it. You don't look that way, you know, but it has that feel.
It's actually a pretty funny story. So my grandfather is Gino Vezzani. My dad is Gino Vezzani Jr., and they literally my parents had an opportunity to call me Gino Vezzani III from Chicago. I was from Chicago, and they passed on that because my mom was blonde hair, light skin. She's like, this is going to be a blonde haired kid. We can't call him Gino Vezzani.
I liked it. I mean, that would have been.
Sometimes I think I missed out a little bit.
You would have had like serious street cred walking into any room or situation, I think. And the best cheese, Pat's and Gino's are like the two famous cheesesteak places in Philly. So that even like lends a little more credibility there to what I was saying about the Rocky voice. He actually runs through the Italian market right past him, and every time he's training in the movie and runs up the steps. It's awesome. Anyways, I digress. So what's up, man? I would love to hear, your background, how this all got started and how you ended up in this space.
For sure. I can kind of start where I found crypto. My co-founder, John Farjo, and we had worked together for a year or so. I think it was like 2015 when he brought it up to me, and he's like, hey man, you know what Bitcoin is? And I was like, no. He's like, you got to check it out. You got to check it out. And, coming from a world of finance and technology, I was like, this is where the intersection of these two spaces are. And I need to be on board. And so we just started kind of going back and forth on everything and just learning about more. And then things like Ethereum started coming up. And, I remember back to buying, hamburgers at lunchtime with Ethereum and sending it to my friend, if it was $5 and, God knows how much I made him. He's
expensive hamburger, dude.
He took me to a bunch of USD games, so it's all good. It's all even now. But yeah, it was just, coming out of school. I came out of school in 2008. And it was an interesting time back then too, especially in the financial world. I have a finance and economics degree, and I wanted to go work for Lehman Brothers. I had some friends that had worked there, and they were trying to help me get a job there. And it was like I was probably like a month away from moving to New York, and I'll never forget. Lehman Brothers saying they're like, "Hey, we're sorry, we're not taking a class in this year. That that we're not taking the next kind of grad class in." And then about like a couple months later, they don't exist anymore. Right. Wow. And I was like, holy shit, how do we get to a point in society where this 100-year-old bank, where it's like the most nostalgic, I mean, there's like Lehman Brothers Hospital, and it's just ingrained into like the society there and everywhere.
It's an institution in the United States.
Yes. And Bear Stearns too. And so, I know the story about how, Goldman made it through that, and AIG, and, we don't have to go into all that crap, but, came out of school and I was like, what do I do? Where do I go next? Right. And so being from Chicago, I went down to the University of Chicago, and, there was a job fair there. And, I'm like, I thought I was going to do like proprietary trading, like prop trading. Like I was going to trade like corn, and like just got Chicago Board of Trade. I was like, this is what some of my friends' parents did when I was younger. I wanted to follow that path a little bit. And, it's kind of a funny story, but, I'll never forget, I see this really long line for people waiting for this one company, and the line kind of just so happened to be a bunch of really pretty girls. And I'm 22, and I was kind of like, what's that company? And someone's like, that's an advertising agency. And I was like, well, what do they do? I don't even know what they do. And they're like, well, they like marketing and stuff. I was like, oh, I'll go over there. And I look at the list and they had a financial analyst position open. And I was like, oh, I could do that. And so I applied for it. And, I think the starting salary, at Lehman or something was going to be like close to $100,000 a year. And the
After
starting
bonus,
salary
for sure.
yeah. And the starting salary for this was like 36 or something. And, my dad worked in the mortgage business, and I called him. I was like, Dad, I got this job. Like, it's 35. Like, what, should I really do it? And he, working in the mortgage business was like, I think Washington Mutual or something had just gone out of business, which was at the time kind of like the Rocket Mortgage, the largest like loan originator in the country.
Yeah.
And he's like, they just went out of business. He's like, take anything. He's like, get a job now. And so I actually ended up finding like the world of advertising, and basically worked in like the proverbial mailroom. I worked on the general ledger of the accounting side, and learned a completely different business. And the company was called at the time Draft FCB. It was Foot, Cone, and Belding. It was a kind of a historical ad agency. And I'll never forget, I think it was like the first year or so I worked there, they won the Miller-Coors account when Miller and Coors merged. And they literally had the Backstreet Boys come play in the office.
That world, man.
In the office. And I was just thinking to myself, like, it was probably 6 months into working there where my boss was like, hey, you don't need to wear a tie anymore. Like, you could just kind of it's a little bit, I was wearing like a tie, like a suit into like an advertising agency every day. So I did that for many years and learned about a completely different business than, I was in. And it kind of my curiosity just kind of brought me through that business. And, I ended up moving out to Southern California from Chicago to work on some cool accounts like Taco Bell and Smokey the Bear and these cool things, and started to try to maybe produce a little bit of radio and kind of do like broadcast business affairs and things like that. And eventually you find out in advertising that, it doesn't pay as well as a young, fella in that industry. And so I went and actually ended up going into sales and worked for a big company called Owens Corning. And at 25, I was running California, Nevada, and Hawaii, and had a, expense account and a car. And it was like the most epic, experience to be just traveling around and learning, channel management and pricing strategy and like what manufacturing, which is something that I didn't know.
Right.
And, founded another company that was called Lifeline Response. And I was a kind of a junior co-founder there, and ended up going through a Techstars accelerator with that company back in 2014. And that's where I kind of learned, I was kind of a gamer and always knew technology, but I was really learning technology at that point and learning what user experience was and learning other stuff. And so that's kind of like I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur and be in startups. And that was my first kind of like dip my toes into that, which was pretty epic. And so learned that. And, that went for a couple of years. Company's still around. I kind of learned a lesson there about like founder conflict and everything else, which was an interesting thing. And it's why most companies fail. But, unbelievable experience there. And then actually went back into advertising, but this time kind of with a new shell. I learned a lot more than I'd kind of, I think, jumped past a lot of people with 4 or 5 years of startup experience. You realize like, whoa, you really learn a lot when you try to start your own thing. And ended up working in advertising again for a couple of years, and, did everything from building mobile apps for Hyundai to writing strategy for Super Bowl commercials and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then I found Bitcoin, and it was like, this is where I need to be. So long-winded response for you there.
Yeah, it's great. I have a lot of similarities, actually. My background, with my own college degree, and like I graduated in 99, but in 2004, I went and worked in the mailroom of a commercial editing agency. So they, the ad agencies were their clients, and they were editing literally like the Super Bowl commercials and stuff. And it was the same thing, because they were basically, to win accounts meant who could entertain the people the best when they were in the office. So I was sitting in this like little mail place delivering packages and stuff because I was just desperate and needed money. But like everyone's playing ping pong and drinking, and it's open bar and open everything. Everyone's playing video games, all the guys editing and hiring talent to come in, and kind of same thing. I was really mind blown by that industry in general, how much money they spend to woo business and to keep it. Because the people basically just choose who they like to work with the best, since everybody's pretty much competent, I think. So we got to your Bitcoin story. So talk about, obviously you discovered Bitcoin, you believed in it, but why LunarCRUSH?
Yeah. And so John and I would kind of just every day, like, we call each other on the ride home, and we would just kind of start shoot the shit a little bit about, what's missing from this industry? How do we get involved? And, we were kind of those people once we started to figure stuff out and talk to people about it. We were the friends in the text thread that everyone was like, hey, what do I buy? What's Tron? Just like all this crazy stuff. And so we thought to ourselves, we're like, what do we do? How do, and it was partially people were like, oh, you can consult on this stuff and help people. And I was like, that's not really, you in order to be an expert in something, you have to build in that industry. You have to really understand how to build something and what the market looks like. And that's how you become an expert. And so we wanted to be experts. And so when we thought about the ways that we learned about different projects, it was really, you're going out to Twitter and you're looking for things, and because that's where the social discourse is happening. And then you're looking on places like Reddit and you're trying to find different news articles, and they're all outdated and you can't really track the conversation in real time. And so we said to ourselves, like, how do we create transparency to a point where, you're going to know as an individual at a glance, if something like Yearn Finance does have a community, right? And the community is really what denotes value in our space, right? There are no, and we talked about at the beginning of when we started kind of creating the language in this space of, there's no earnings reports, there's no earnings calls. Like, how do you know whether or not something has value or not? And it was really, does it have a community? And it's almost the same thing as the number of wallets type idea behind, are people talking about it? Are people contributing? Are they excited? And then not only are they excited in real time, but are they excited and have they been excited over a longer period of time? So, we talk about projects like a Chainlink or a Tezos that have been around for a while, that have kind of a groundswell, if you will, of people that are surrounding the project. And so when we thought about that, we're like, man, this has to be, like, that's where we kind of saw at the beginning of what we knew that it could turn into. And so it was really, can we get this data, right? Can we get the Twitter feed? Can we get Reddit APIs? Can we get news like all in one place? And that's like the easiest part of the business. The hardest part of the business is organizing and cleaning that data. And right. So it's like that to us, we have a lot of people that come to us and they're like, oh, well, we know this hedge fund or someone else is doing this. They just grab all this data. And I was like, yeah, well, what are you doing with it? Right? Like there's a lot that you need to do in order to make it usable and make it simple and have the experience on your product be at a place where people can just drop on there and be like, oh, I know what this is. Holy crap. Like this coin came out like 2 weeks ago and it's gone like this. And there's community is gone like this. Now the community's dropped off. Well, what do you think the price is going to do? And so it's educating the space and something that's a little bit different that maybe they're not used to. And so we went and just started building it, coming up with it, brought a little bit of a team on, brought some other co-founders in, and just started building. And then it was July of 2019 is when we actually went full time at it. We were working kind of moonlighting. I was going to conferences while I was at another position, just because it was like, this is how you have to build in the space when we were kind of in crypto winter. And so we were building during that time, and it was like we always knew that we were doing something that mattered, and we were focused and our heads were down because it felt right, even though people would come to us and be like, I thought like Bitcoin was like dead. Like what happened there? And then you're just looking at them like, what? Like, I think Blockstream's like shooting satellites into space or something to keep the network going. So those billionaires are doing that. Like, I think it's probably going to keep going.
Yeah, fair enough. So how do you quantify the size of a community based on, social data and interaction?
Couple of different ways. So we look at social volume, which is just pure, almost just imagine like unique hits to your website.
Right.
This is just individuals.
Mentions.
Yeah. Mention. If you mention Bitcoin 5 times that day, that's going to be 5 unique mentions of what social volume is. And then we also look at engagement. And so we're looking at, if you mention Bitcoin 5 times, how many likes did it have? How many retweets did it have? How many upvotes on Reddit? How many times was it mentioned in a news article? How many YouTube, Medium? So we're adding all those in the kind of virality of a post. And so that's a good way for people to kind of denote, is there a huge spike in something that's happening? That's like something's happening right now. You need to be paying attention to it. And then we've started to kind of add a couple more metrics, like a social contributor. So how many individuals over time? So if you're talking about something that's just one time in the day. And so it's a little bit different of a metric, but it's kind of how, like I was saying before, you really kind of feel the groundswell of whether a project's working. And then we developed a couple of kind of proprietary metrics where, we're going to have a lot more of these that come out. But the first one we call our Galaxy score, just because we're all about just lunar and moon and crushing and everything else.
Gotta get the moon, man. Crush the moon. Let's go.
Yeah, got to get back to go to the moon. There's only 2 ways to go. And Galaxy score is really looking at a coin's performance against itself. It's kind of like you racing against yourself over and over and trying to beat your time. So like the Galaxy score is 0 to 100. And, it tends to be in like a 30 to 80 range roughly. And so when it's 80 or 90, that means that there's a lot of social volume on that coin compared to its previous social volume. Its price performance, so like something like a moving average, like a MACD, is outperforming. And then it's also looking at market volume and then correlating all of those things together to say, are they all moving together? And that's really what kind of will boost a score up.
So it's not just social data. I mean, it's social data in confluence with technical indicators that people are probably familiar with and use.
Correct. So we tried to back test all the different kind of technical analysis that's out there and figured out, which ones, at least within crypto, were working more over time. And so those are the ones that we kind of slot into the scores. So it helps us identify at least the momentum side of price, because a lot of people trade off that, and it does work if you use it well. But social added into that is really just kind of that extra boost it needed.
So the Galaxy score almost could be, or maybe has been like viewed as an indicator on a chart.
For sure. Yeah. We have on LunarCRUSH, you can look at that on like a trading view chart over time. And it's real time though, which is kind of the, cool. People are always like, there's a lot of people out there like, oh, I did some analysis on this one, this one coin, and we're going to rank them as like an A-, right? It's like, well, A- for how long? 3 months?
Right. Because things happen quickly in this industry. You could be an A- one day and an F plus a week.
Right.
F-.
Bitcoin's probably an A+ 4 days ago. Right now, I'd put it like a D+, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
really crazy. So like we always say, in trading, people joke sort of that, volume precedes price. Like check what the volume is doing, and then you have a very likelihood as to whether a trend is intact and what's coming next. It sounds like that's what you're doing, like that social data and sentiment is somewhat like volume, because you can see this swell in interest in advance of price moving and therefore becomes an indicator. Is that like a proper way to sort of view it?
Oh yeah, I'd say that would be a great way to look at it. And it's also this, people start chatting first before they're potentially buying. Like, has anyone looked at this? Or, or if there's a piece of news that happens, if there's an acute event that happens, people still need to get, in our industry, their coins to the right place, to their assets to get somewhere to buy something. So there's lag there. And that's where some of the larger, more sophisticated investors can take advantage of some of that stuff, because they've got assets sitting in the places that they need to be. But yes, it's essentially sometimes volume definitely precedes price. It's something that we think investors should always be looking at if you want to really understand, potentially what's a longer term investment, I would say.
So what, like if your average person comes to LunarCRUSH, basically is like, how do I use this? How am I going to make money with this? What do I do? How, if you come to your site for the first time and you want to check it out and you want to learn how to use it, what's the approach?
So when you log into LunarCRUSH, you're going to see a markets page, almost like you'd see on some of the other standard kind of pricing pages. But as you kind of dig deeper, you're going to find, most likely you're going to find our two metrics first, which is Galaxy score, like I mentioned, and then alt rank. And so alt rank could be my favorite piece of LunarCRUSH that that's what I stare at all day.
Right.
Is I rank everything by our alt rank, which alt rank is looking at a coin's performance against Bitcoin over time. So is it beating Bitcoin? Yes or no? Does it have a social volume that's increasing over time? And then does it have actual tradable market volume, right? Like, is there is there actual volume for you to push money in and out of this thing and actually trade it versus like trying to buy a specific coin and literally moving the market with like 25 grand, right?
Yeah, good times.
So, yeah, which a lot of people, and once you do that, you're like, well, I'm never getting this money out. And so you just hold it forever. But I would say that's where I would start as someone coming onto LunarCRUSH first, is just look at the market a little bit differently than you normally would with just price, and rank it by alt rank and just kind of see what pops into that top 10. And again, it's real time, just like Galaxy Score. So it's changing when we get data. It's not every 30 seconds or minute. Whenever we get data, that changes. And so I would say, look at the top 25, look at the coins that end up in that top 25 over and over and over again. That means good price for Bitcoin, good community, which we said is really what you need in order to kind of create that groundswell, and market volume so you can trade it, right? You can invest in it.
So how do you quantify whether it's positive or negative engagement? Because like, I'm sure, this is going to date our conversation, but things like hot dog and yam, that everybody was talking about, but because they went to zero, right? So how do you make sure that what you're seeing is positive interaction and not just a swell and people, freaking out and panicking with anger about a coin?
Well, conversation and sentiment's an interesting one, because sometimes when people are even talking negatively, because it is so tribal, it doesn't necessarily mean that is a negative. It's going to be something negative for price.
Sure.
So,
sure.
Right. The way that we look at it today is, as we receive all this data from these feeds and it's coming in, we actually we're analyzing it ourselves first. And so we're looking and training a machine learning model on crypto specific data and language. So, if you're out there, you're trading, JP Morgan or Duke Energy or something, you're not going to go tweet and be like, Duke Energy just got wrecked, REKT. Like, you're not going to,
you're not going to get many responses. I might, but
right. You might, but it's like, as a trader, you're kind of blending into different markets, which I think all traders do. And so, we've trained, you couldn't just pick up a regular NLP natural language processing library. You can't just pick up something that says good, bad, up, down, and try to put that on the crypto market. It's not going to work.
That's how they talk. Yeah.
Yeah. We've trained it to say, if Dogecoin is mooning, like, that's probably a positive sentiment. Right. And so we've trained this. And so as we've trained that data, now we just unleash it on the, 300,000 today pieces of data that come in every day. And that helps us gauge sentiment a little bit, bullish and bearish. And so that goes into, as it gets smarter, because it's like machine learning is only as smart as it is today. And then eventually, it's like it can't land the plane. And then eventually it could land the plane better than a human can every single time.
Of course.
So if you try to hit those thresholds.
How much of this could be automated for a trader? Just set a bot to track it, do your buying and selling, and go drink your pina colada on the beach. Pina colada on the beach. Pina colada.
Yeah. Pina. I think, I don't even know if it's pina. I don't know. I think with the bot,
that's a thing.
Yeah, like when I'm like whacking it right now in the market, trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing, because I can't.
Right now, yeah, no.
We could talk about that in a minute, but bots. I think it's an interesting one with bots, and it's kind of where people say they want to get, and it seems like a very clean way to trade, and everyone wants to set it and forget it and walk away and just make money forever into perpetuity. But
never happens.
I think there's so many different types of traders and investors, and to get people in the crypto industry, that might be a little bit of the older generation onboarded. It's like, I don't know if that's like necessarily the place that we build into first, I guess would be my thought around that. I do think that we are. So right now in LunarCRUSH, if you come on, you have to kind of search for stuff a little bit, right? You've got to go to your Chainlink page and maybe see where the engagement is and whatnot. So what we're releasing, and I guess I can just talk about it. What we're releasing here in the next couple of weeks is an alerting tool. And so what we're actually going to be able to do is, across all of our metrics, whether or not you're more advanced or you're a beginner, you're going to be able to set custom alerts for all of the different social metrics, right? So like I mentioned before, with something like an alt rank, right now you kind of have to be staring at LunarCRUSH to know, hey, like, Chainlink again or Tezos or something, one of the mid cap altcoin is staying in that, crossing that alt rank position 10. But what if you want to trade, goes from 20 to 10, right? So now you're going to be able to get alerted when anything moves and where it moves. And so it's kind of a first step into that. And so if you'll also be able to back test in real time all of those strategies. And it's going to be super cheap as well. We know this is a global industry. 75% of our market is international. It's not in the US, almost 80% now, which is crazy to think that the US is we're just so far behind with regulation and everything else.
Laggards. Yeah.
So it's just crushing us. And so I could see a scenario, and we talk about it, where if you can kind of perfect those alerts and you're doing well with those alerts, it's a very simple step to connect to an exchange of your choosing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You touched on something earlier when you were talking about why you formed the company, which is, I found really interesting, because I make the same sort of joke all the time. Well, it's not like I can see this company's P&L or like their quarterly earnings report, and so how do and then that leads to the kind of meme joke that there's no fundamentals in the market and we can just trade the charts in crypto because it's all vaporware or something, which I don't necessarily believe, but it is very hard to understand the fundamental value. So are you saying really that, like, in lieu of having fundamentals, the real fundamentals here are community, and they are social engagement, and they are, the whole Twitterverse as a whole to some degree?
Definitely to some degree. I definitely think that you need to be looking at this data if you want to make more educated decisions on where to invest your time and money in the cryptocurrency space. So, like you said, in lieu of, there are going to be, there's sectors of coins now, as we start to learn a little bit more about the space and it matures. There are, all of these projects, as we call them, are working towards potential revenue, depending on where they are. There's public blockchains, right? And so depending on what they are, it really matters more in our space than it would in maybe a traditional space. And I think the traditional space will probably move into this kind of social public discourse more.
Look at Tesla and Hertz. And these are, we are seeing sentiment driven, like social media FOMO in traditional markets.
Right. So how do you track that? How do you get out ahead of it? How do you be alerted when these things happen? And that's kind of where we come in, is listening to all things financial that are out there. And then crypto, just because that's where we are, we're just so passionate about it. And we know that this space can lead to some pretty amazing products. We just had a really cool project on, and I'll give them a shout out. It's called Safe Haven. And, they're working on custody, but for when you die, what do you do with your coins? Right. And it's like one of the better use cases, I think. And it's just, they hopefully will move towards, maybe someone like my father's age. He's a baby boomer, is getting up there. It's like, he doesn't really need to know that it's crypto oriented. He just needs to know that, hey, I give, my kids these 4 different keys, and when they come together and it's validated by a third party, it's just released, right? Done and done. It's a very simple, way to distribute and go through stuff that you couldn't otherwise work with the traditional infrastructure that's out there. And I think you'll see all sorts of stuff like, I think real estate is a huge one. And that's just like DeFi it's just the next phase of cryptocurrency. That's all it is. Like, staking started, and then it's like, well, what can we do with staking? Holy shit. And now DeFi comes out of it, but it's just, each one of these is a cool product. Like, why can't I instantly get a loan across a market because my FICO is 760 to 820, and I want to sell my house. And then once I instantly get that, it triggers an inspection and triggers an appraisal.
Why do you need middlemen for any of this? Why do you need a loan originator when there's a person who wants money and there's a person who wants to lend money?
Because I got to press the print and look at your credit. Like, Scott, how many credit cards do you have? Oh man, you got a ton of credit left because you opened 50 cards in 2008 and said you made $5 million.
Killing it.
That's $5 a month on those credit cards is such a small percentage, right? Like, it's all bullshit.
Don't be a part of the 7.1 million Bitcoiners in the United States who have Bitcoin and a retirement account, but don't have Bitcoin in their retirement account. Seriously. You can hold Bitcoin in your retirement account and not just GBTC. How can you do this? Through a self-directed choice IRA by Kingdom Trust. The first 1,000 users to open a Choice IRA will receive $62.50 in free Bitcoin. Visit retirewithchoice.com/wolf. That's retirewithchoice.com/WOLF. Podcast listeners receive extra points to move up the waitlist and get their Choice IRA first. Do it right now. It's time to take control of your financial future and free yourself from the restrictions of classic retirement accounts. Are you sick of paying ridiculous fees to trade crypto? It's time you try Voyager. It's hands down my favorite place to buy and trade crypto, and it's 100% commission free. Voyager gives you easy access to more than 30 top crypto assets, and you can instantly transfer cash from your bank account so you never miss a trading opportunity. Even better, you can now automatically earn interest on your crypto holdings. Currently, they're offering 5% interest on Bitcoin and 6% on USDC. Yes, you heard that correctly, 6%. And there are no limits or lockups, which means your funds always stay liquid. Find out why so many people are making the switch to Voyager. Visit investvoyager.com or search for Voyager on the iTunes or Google Play Store and get $25 in free Bitcoin when you use the promo code SCOTT25. That's investvoyager.com, promo code SCOTT25 for $25 in free Bitcoin and start trading today. Hey guys, I want to take a moment to talk about our sponsor Electroneum and their amazing new platform, Anytask.com, a place where freelancers can finally be paid for their work without needing a bank. Freelancers match directly with potential clients and receive ETN as payment. Even better, ETN can be spent in over 2,000 physical and online locations worldwide. A lot of companies talk the talk of mainstream adoption, but Electroneum is truly walking the walk. They're banking the unbanked worldwide and offering opportunity to those who lack access to the resources that many of us take for granted. In the next few months, they're also adding more in-app purchases, including local food and supplies, paid TV, gaming, gift cards, and much more. If you'd like to learn more, head on over to electroneum.com. That's ELECTRONEUM.com. Yeah, and people can gamify the system. DeFi is so interesting right now. It's like you said, but I have my fears for where a lot of it's going. But I think that, definitely it is somewhat the future of finance, and we will see real players emerge. I think it's just like any boom, the tech boom, the .com boom, whatever, you're just going to see like this grand culling of all the nonsense and scams and stuff. But I mean, it's crazy to see things go from like $1,000 to $0 in less than 5 minutes.
Yes. No, we haven't seen this in a long time.
Yeah, since 2017. Have you, back testing what you do? Can you like confidently say, hey, we would have seen this crap coming, or we would have seen this amazing pump coming? I would imagine the negative part is hard because it's not what you're looking for, but.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit more nuanced for a trader or an investor. It's really looking internally and saying to yourself, I get a request. I get like 10 to 15 requests a day to add new projects to LunarCRUSH.
Well, now,
so it's like, it's insane how many. I mean, it was probably, we'll call it 6 months ago. Maybe it was like 1 or 2 a day that we would get. Right. And so it's like, if you're an investor coming out into the market and you're looking and you can only find this at a very obscure place, and, maybe we don't even have social data up on it yet. And
nobody's
so you're saying,
right.
Do they even have a community? Do I want to invest in something where it's like some random thing that might not even come to market for a while? If you're okay with waiting and there's a test net and everything else, that's fine. But you probably don't want to invest in something, but people chase.
Yeah. So a complete lack of social data actually is a great indicator. Like somebody's selling you a bill of goods and nobody's talking about it. That might be a pretty bad sign. So that's actually an interesting sort of flip side to it. So I know, just so people know, like you guys have some pretty big name investors, right? I mean, you've gotten some investment from some pretty impressive people. Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we bootstrapped the company from the beginning ourselves. I mean, we were kind of fortunate enough to be working, and we have a little bit older of a founding team. We're not all in our lower 20s anymore, trying to scrape and not.
My
sleep
God,
anymore.
You think you're older? Older in
the
your
tech
30s.
space. In the tech space. So I'd say we're like our average age.
I get
maybe
it. No, you are actually right. It just makes me feel terrible because I'm 43 years old.
Oh yeah, no, it's if you ever watched Silicon Valley, it's always like that one episode of like the one guy's name is like the Carver, and it's like actually some like 15-year-old kid that just takes a bunch of Adderall, like doesn't sleep, crushes through stuff. So that's what you feel is he a little bit, mature in the space. But we bootstrapped and we built this thing, and we were fortunate enough to do that. And so we actually ended up going to an accelerator first. So we did a Techstars accelerator in July of last year, which is depending on your startup and what you're going through, it is a very nice catalyst to kind of denote a point in time where it's like, hey, it's time to work on this full time. And I think we took the appropriate steps to kind of line that up and get involved in that. And then coming out of that, being in the Los Angeles area, we met a couple of investors that run, it's called Crypto Invest Summit, now the LA Blockchain Summit. Alon Gorin and Joseph Home, they partnered up with Tim Draper to create Draper Gorin Home, which is a blockchain studio. But also they're amazing investors because they're partners. Like there's investors that you bring on that are just like, hey man, like talk to me in 5 years. I know this takes like 5 to 7 years, like just whatever, just send me the monthly updates. And then there are people that are like texting you, how can I help? What can I do? Help us out with this, post this. And that's the type of investor that, Tim, Joseph, and Alon are, is they're helping us understand the market. They're helping us get deeper into the market. And just kind of bringing the brand to a place, I think that, in conjunction with all of our work is it's just coming from a cool place, I think, in the space where it used to be a lot of pseudonyms out there. And I think we've talked about this in DMs before a little bit, like pseudonyms of people and, how do you have to put your face out there, right? We have to legitimize the space in a way that, is real, or, unfortunately the rest of the market probably won't think it is, right? And so I think it's getting better now because we've legitimized it, but it's like you have to put your face and name out there. And so we wanted to do that, and they're super supportive with everything we've done. So they've been great.
It's an interesting mix because, it's like the old rich guys in suits, right? And so you've got the old rich guys in suits, but then the young guys who get it. And I've always argued that, the community might say like short the banks and F Wall Street and all those things. But the reality is we need guys in suits to show up to Senate hearings and get the Wall Street money. And it's largely not going to be millennials with, as you said, sort of like millennials with farm animals as their avatars are not the ones who are going to push it forward in that market. You know what I mean? So I think that it's a nice mix to have those guys who really believe in it, that are putting their money where their mouth is, I guess. I mean, Draper has been a pretty amazing proponent for the crypto space.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's like in our space, sometimes I think people think it's like almost like a little wacky kind of, it's like, I talked to like my dad's financial advisor when I was starting this, and he's like, oh, that's just drug money. It's just all, isn't it just people just doing drug money?
Dollars
like,
are drug money, buddy. Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, I wait a year, right? And then he's like, oh, still it's drug money. And then I wait another year. He's like, and then now it's not him that's learning. It's all of his investors that are like, hey man, like my buddy like just made like 140% last year on this. Like, he's like, we did 7, like what's going on here? He's like, well, we beat the S&P, and then he's like, okay, fine. They wait another year. It's like, hey, my buddy just did like another 300% on this cryptocurrency thing. Are we going to get into it? And so it got to a point where finally it's like, now I'm getting the call from the financial advisor going, hey, what's up? What's happening?
Yeah,
with this?
Their hand is forced. Every one of these people has no interest until their clients annoy them enough that they think they might lose their clients if they don't have an answer. Exactly. Which was weird because I was on like one of the Goldman call recently, like a few months ago, and I was like really excited. I got on the call and I was going to hear what they had to say about it. And you could tell that it was like enough people had asked that they had to publicly dismiss it. Right. And they went on there and they were like, this is trash. We don't see any value. It is what it is. Stay away. And I was really disappointed because I thought that their stance would be different. But I do think that it's completely like how much clients force their hand to see if they're going to be interested.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really wish, and it's been the US's stance to kind of keep it at an arm's length versus melding with the space. And I think, because they're thinking like, okay, maybe, and this is with any new technology, maybe they're thinking, this is the end of our way of life, and that's scary for people. Where in reality, if they embraced it, it's like they could shepherd it in a way and they can get out ahead of it. I do think, they still have enough money on hand, and everyone else, look at the entire market cap of crypto, right? It's like people like Two Sigma are trading that in like a day, right? On currencies globally. So it's like they're just, and this could technically represent the next leg up, right? Like if Bitcoin hits 100,000, now it's big enough potentially for some of these big players to actually start moving in. And so it's like, that's the leg from 100 to 225, which Tim says is 5% of money supply globally. And that's where we need to get to have some dominance in the
I talk about this all the time, and it's come up in probably the last 3 or 4 podcasts that I've done, which is that like, it's just not big enough yet. So they want in, they just literally can't buy until the market cap is big enough that they know that if they need to exit, they'll actually have someone to sell to.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, if you have a $500 million, $1 billion position, you need to know that if things go bad, you're going to need to be able to exit it. It's just not big enough. I think Apple's like market cap dropped last day or two more than the entire crypto space,
Oh yeah. Elon probably lost $20 billion in like 5 days. Like I couldn't imagine, not affecting him, but still.
Well, I guess if you gained like 5 times that much in the preceding 2 or 3 months, that's how I like to look at my losses too. Well, they're losses on gains, so it's fine, not a big deal. But you talk to Tim, these guys all the time. So that really is their firm belief then that institutional money comes with more growth, not that they're buying the bottom as, is sort of the idea that people have in the actual community.
I think for them, I think it's a little bit of, the idea of the larger institutions coming in with larger market cap. That's come from some of our research of talking to some of the larger funds that we've spoken with. I think for some of the people that have been in this space since the beginning, and the Tims of the world, it's usage, right? It's actual usage as money and getting people shopping with it and using it. And that's how it grows and becomes bigger. And, then there's countries that might be in kind of an interesting place inflation wise, maybe not the United States, but maybe like a Venezuela, maybe a Zimbabwe, someone like that, that's smaller, that says, you know what, we have inflation of, 10,000% a month, right? Even a fluctuation of Bitcoin from $12K to $4,000 is nothing compared to how like money being used as toilet paper, which in our society for 3 weeks we thought was going to be the currency, right? It's
exactly.
There's like a completely different way to look at it for a small to mid-sized country that's trying to be competitive in the market and the landscape, which I think is huge in today's world, because looking at the US and looking at coronavirus, we can work from anywhere. Countries need to compete for business, and that's where taxes come in place, and that's where incentives come in place, and that's why you see the Microsofts of the world based in Ireland and people moving to places like Singapore or, Santiago, Chile, which is favorable in Latin America. Like you're seeing these companies move to different places.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because you said, a lot of these people want to see it used as money, but all the regulation and tax law in the United States prohibits it from ever being used as money. If I buy a Starbucks coffee with $1, it's not a taxable transaction. Right. So how do we ever get to the point where we're using crypto, at least in this country, where we're using it as money if it's literally prohibited by the government to view it as such?
Yeah, no, that's a very tough question. And all I know right now is that the situation we're in is every time even if I use a micro transaction on Brave, right, and I'm getting paid, that's like buying and selling a home, right? And like how many times a day do you do that? Like, what if I accidentally sent some to the wrong address and that's gone? Like, how do they like, oh, we don't believe you didn't send that.
You don't get a write-off, right? A hack does not get you a write-off. It's insane.
Right. So that's a problem that needs to be solved very quickly. And just so there's less people moving to Puerto Rico, I think. People are
but what's crazy is like, what kind of pisses me off is, so I have over 5,000 transactions this year. Right. If you're talking about microtransactions and stuff, I try to keep on top of it because I don't want to get caught with my pants down when tax time comes. And every time you market buy or market sell something, as you touched on earlier, with any size, that can be 70 orders, right? They'll consider that 70 different transactions because it's every time you fill, not the order that you place. So every one of those is a taxable transaction. I mean, it's such a cluster, and it's so just absolutely absurd. But what pisses me off, like I was going to say, they're going to change it. And I'm not going to get my tax money back that I paid in these wonderful years of trading, right? So like in 2 years, when they come to their senses, they're going to say it's dollars in and dollars out of the crypto market, like Forex or something, probably. You know, like whatever you do with your Bitcoin, just pay us the taxes when the Bitcoin comes out. I'm going to want a refund, man.
Oh, yeah.
Like our taxes end up being like 50, 60% by the time you calculate all these things and try to make sense of it.
When you did it last year, did you use a software or anything to help you out with those?
I used like 4 of the softwares, and then I talked to my accountant, and I talked to an attorney. But this year it's even crazier, honestly, because it seems like the IRS is actually paying more attention, right? So I'm afraid to even miss like one micro transaction at this point, or to associate one wrong, which effectively means going through thousands of transactions or keeping on top of it and making sure that they're associated. This year is different also because I have, I have people, I like to actually like transact in crypto, even though it's so prohibitive by the government. So I'll have people pay me in Bitcoin instead of money, but like that's associated different. And what if you pay someone back a commission on that who brokered a deal or something? Can you write off paying it to? It's just very, very complex.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we accept some Bitcoin as a business as well. And it's like it comes through. So if you invoice someone for $1,000, but when they send it, you get 998. It's like, well, do we have to adjust that? Was their invoice only 998? But our contract said it was 1,000.
So
I guess we'll just let that go. So it's just creating so many barriers and headaches. And I mean, God bless the accountants that are working through this, because they're saving everyone so much time. It's just like, dude, if you could just deal with this, like I can't even go through everything.
But the thing is, the software can, and they're getting better, but like an accountant really can't, because like they don't. And depending, if you're just trading Bitcoin and Ethereum, sure. But if you're trading a lot of altcoins, if you're transacting, if you're, God forbid, like have a MetaMask wallet or any of these Ethereum wallets, and every one of those transactions and your gas fees, I mean, they're just not even going to have access to all of it unless you're using some sort of software. So it really is kind of just a train wreck, but I guess we can move on from that.
One more. Do you think it was accurate for your trades? Like when you looked at the numbers at the end of the year, were you like, that seems pretty accurate? Or
it lines up. Like when it gets a little like iffy is, it's all based on a cost basis, often of things that you bought years past. Like there has to be a reconciliation for the amount that you sold and the amount that you had and where it came from. And sometimes it was just like an exchange from 4 years ago that I don't have the tax records of, where like I transferred some coin that wasn't on a major exchange. And once I transferred, and there's no like origin of that. So listen, it's really nitpicky. If they come after me for that, it'll be the IRS's fun job to go find the origin of that transaction. Godspeed. But it's at that level of insanity if you really take it as seriously as I do. I mean, I'm not going to evade taxes. It's just, I'm going to pay every penny. It sucks, but I'm going to pay every penny of it. So have you had the similar experience? I mean, how did you do it?
Well, when I talked to some people that use some of the software, they said that they plugged in all of their exchanges and they did it to the T exactly what they should. And it actually came back with like huge credits because of the timing and the years and everything else that they did. And so they would go and they'd be like, they would go and they'd be like, all right, like $100,000 loss. The government owes me $60,000. Like, this is fantastic.
They only let you write off like
them down a little bit in that space is what I was thinking. I was like, the government's still got, they're slowing them down because they can't. They're like, wait, we just told everyone that we want them to pay us for their crypto taxes, and now we owe all this money. This is not what we thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, people took massive losses. I mean, if you're like reporting in 2018, kind of 19, you would expect that it was mostly people trying to get a write-off and not trying to evade anything. So having, you obviously have been doing this for quite a few years, even though you formally launched in 2019. What are you seeing that's different this time in this sort of run up, since March? Is the sentiment different? Can you get a gauge of where the money's coming from that's pouring into the market through social?
I think I think it's some of the same investors that we've seen. I mean, when we look at social volume though, and it's much higher, much, much, much higher than it was in previous years. And especially because it's new, interesting projects that I think people can understand and get a grasp of, that there is real world application. It's like when you launched, everyone was technically a public blockchain back in 2017, and they said they were going to go solve something, but it was just like, no one saw a market for any of these things, right? And so I think that's why the crash was so violent. Whereas this time, yes, a lot of these projects will go away. And my feeling is always, and you can talk about people that are kind of Bitcoin maximalists and the way that they see the world. And there's just going to be one. In my view, I feel like most of the cryptocurrencies that exist today will not exist in the future. But
sure.
I do believe that there will be more cryptocurrencies in the future than there are today. And people are going to just keep launching and keep trying to solve problems through the technology, because it does make so much sense and it does create so much value by removing the middleman, right? Like we were talking about. But I feel the difference this time is that there's solid entrepreneurs in the space that have a little bit of expertise, that have been through it, that now have created connections and networks at, potentially some larger exchanges or some of the bigger companies that we have in our space, and they can start to get things done in a better way. I also believe that people are much more focused on user experience and the experience of using their product, that before it was very developer heavy, right? Like copy my key, where's my seed phrase, what do I do with that? And now people are not only educated on that more, but it's also simplified. And so as we move into that space more, it's not going to be like, hey, where's my key to do this or that? It's going to be like, oh, I just log into this thing and it pays my Verizon bill and these other things with my staking coins every single month. Oh, that's awesome.
Do you think those are the biggest barriers to entry for like retail? I mean, outside of regulation and taxes that we talked about, which are absurd. And if your average person hears about that, they might just run away. But do you think that those are the barriers to entry? It's understanding the tech, the fear of being hacked, the not knowing how to use your wallet, not understanding what a key is.
Yes. That's 100%. I remember John and I went to it was like a Blockstack summit at the beginning when we started looking at this at like the computer museum up in Silicon Valley. And it was like, we were the only two, quasi marketing UX type people that were there. It was just very developer heavy. And it was like the presentations that were given were so technically advanced. It was like us two. And then there was like one kind of like Wall Street guy that kind of saw us and like sat at our table. He's like, what the hell's going on here?
You look normal.
This is nuts. And I was like, yeah, I go, these people are building the future. And we are hopefully here to shepherd in that next phase of usage and understanding. So, because it's nothing without the market and the masses getting in and being able to benefit from a technology without having to understand it, right? Like everyone just uses TikTok. They don't know how, it's delivered. They don't know the algorithm that gives them China. The content that
it's delivered from China. So true. It's interesting. I'm always mind blown now, and maybe it's just I didn't have my finger on the pulse in the same way in the past, and I wasn't as much part of the community, and I didn't have a podcast where I was like inviting these impressive guests. But there's a lot of big Wall Street dudes and people who had these banking jobs and, really like major executives who now have said F it to that world and all want to be in crypto, who see that this is what they want to build things in this space. And you're talking about like people who really understand what's happening. I mean, I interviewed Richard Byworth, the CEO of Diginex, like Equus. They have a investment bank, institutional grade exchange. They do custody. And he said that right now, in all his years running investment banks and whatever, he said he's seeing triple, quadruple the quality talent trying to hire for a crypto company than he ever saw. And those were much bigger, higher paying, desirable jobs at the time.
Yes.
I mean, I think that like people want in now, and that is a little different than the past.
Yeah, no, they're starting to feel like they're being left behind a little bit. And that's not for those people that are so kind of high power, super competitive. That's not a place that they like to live for a long time. And so you're seeing these people, and it's awesome when you see that shift from like, like just to use TikTok as an example, like someone that was at Disney for a long time now, jumping over and running something like a TikTok. It's like, I want to see like VP level Goldman Sachs, SVP level partner type people jumping and trying to like run an exchange, right?
Yeah,
and bringing that up to, like you're saying, like get the legislation filled out, figure out what's going on. I think, we kind of, someone like a Kelly Loeffler, I think we thought that was kind of the position that she was going to take, running, the futures exchange, and then going into Congress. I think there was some other stuff there with like trading, which, we don't have to get into, but it's like people that.
You mean how she sold all of her stock in advance of COVID? No, nothing like that, right?
Yeah, you don't. It's just like
after a secret Senate committee hearing. Yeah,
right.
Maybe.
It's like one of those things where it's like, in today's world, it's like, man, is there really another like police video coming out again? It's almost like, Kelly, you got a chance, you get in there. Like, oh man, like there was such an opportunity. So,
yeah.
People, just humans being humans, right? Like we're fighting these things every day to try and, be straight and narrow and make it happen. And I think there are some very high integrity, amazingly smart people in this space that, I think otherwise, like in the business world, sometimes these people just don't want to go into politics. It's just a nightmare to like go there and deal with that. And it's and so you have a lot of smart people that are just like, I'm just going to build this really kick-ass, cool blockchain business, right? And I'm going to solve this problem that I couldn't solve before. And holy crap, I don't need a bank for that. And, I think that's where it's going to be a pretty interesting next 2 years of figuring out where the next big things are going to come from. And it's going to come from someone like that.
So I guess based on what you're seeing yourself, just as a person who's, day in, day out involved in this industry, but also on LunarCRUSH, I mean, where do you think we are in the next sort of cycle here? I'm not asking for like, what will the price of Bitcoin be in 6 months and then, hold you to it. I'm just curious where you think,
exactly. Yeah, no, I hear you. It's such an interesting, I think right now it's so macro oriented with even something like Bitcoin. And I think, 6 to 8 months ago, and you kind of hear some of the bigger names in our space, talking about like, this is a systematic hedge against, catastrophes. And then COVID happens, and evidently it's not a systematic hedge against global catastrophes, right? It moves in conjunction and, like a gold basically, but with a completely different set of that. And so Bitcoin moves on that, but I think you see the rest of the market moving on Bitcoin in a different variant, I guess. It's, on days where Bitcoin is down, you can have Polkadot up, you can have other projects up, so it's like you're trying to find sometimes needles in a haystack, and social helps you identify that, I think, better than going and trying to find it just on price or technical alone. But I just, the pure amount of talent that's flooding into the space, I mean, there's no question that this space is going to grow, and we're going to have super interesting companies and projects that are going to be built out of it, in my opinion. And where LunarCRUSH sits in that is, just transparency and helping bring to light a lot of these projects that we think are amazing, and that, it's not us picking our coin of the day, right? It's the algorithm that's picking it based on social. And so people are like, man, you guys are really favoriting someone like a VeChain. I was like, well, no, their community is literally popping off every single day. I'm not doing anything. Like, this is what we built to light. And so I think it's, as people focus on community and understand that more and try to bring more people into the fold, I think the space grows pretty rapidly. But I think it's unfortunately going to be led internationally, in places like Singapore and places like the EU and Africa, right? Like, I mean, look at what someone like Akon is going to do. And at least it's like trying to be a shining star somewhere and showing what the best. And when you have a clean palette like that, you can build from the ground up. It's like almost like a Tesla, right? When you don't have the legacy systems in place and you can build something from scratch, look how much more epic it could be.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's so true. So like, what are your, in a perfect world, what does LunarCRUSH look like in 2022, 2024? What do you guys have planned, and how are you going to evolve?
We've got some really, really big stuff planned. I can't talk too much about it right this minute, but the next month or two, I'll be able to pull some stuff out. But, it's going to look a lot like focusing on the projects, helping them, organize, like we were talking about marketing and trying to figure that out. We want to democratize people's ability to we don't just want people that know marketing or know advertising. We want the hardcore developers, the people that might not understand that part of the space. We still want to bring those technologies to light because we think that sometimes those are the projects that the world needs to see. And so we're going to be finding really cool ways to allow those projects to really get on center stage and have people adopt that. And so we're going to be coming up with some really cool stuff for basically them to be a part of LunarCRUSH and have more autonomy over potentially like their pages on our site so that they're the ones that are kind of organizing and getting the word out to them. We also, there's a lot that we can do when we worked on community first, right? A lot of the people that are in the world, they launch a coin and then they try to figure out what they're building and then they try to create a community, right? For us, we knew what we were building, we built it, and now we're building a community, and that community is growing. And so it's, we kind of went at the world of crypto in almost a reverse order, but we think that that's probably the order that you should approach the market to kind of validate your ideas before launching full into infrastructure. It's kind of like starting a Twitter handle, right? If you start a Twitter handle, and you start talking about things that are important to you and what you want the world to look like, and if people gravitate towards that, then you have an audience. So build your audience first is kind of the way that we thought about it. And so it allows us to look at the market going forward and really just decide where we want to go. And so that's the cool part, I think, about what we've put together.
Awesome. So where can people follow you, sign up, you personally, and keep up with the developments?
So just lunarcrush.com. It's free to sign up. So we have like a coin of the day where you can kind of see all of our different metrics, but just sign in with your Twitter, Gmail, email, log in, get all of our metrics on there. You can follow us at LunarCRUSH on Twitter. We're on there posting anywhere from 10 to 50 times a day on insights that we see. So that's kind of a good place to kind of find the news. Mm-hmm. You can find me at Joe Vez on Twitter. I usually just talk about like the stock market and how shitty it is that they print money, but I have a lot to tweet about lately.
My account. What else did they talk
nice. Just lunarcrush.com. Come check us out. I mean, we're tweeting, get out there. We'd love to have you part of our community. So anyone listening.
Oh man, thank you so much for taking the time. And it's really such a different and unique perspective and approach to markets, especially for people who come from other markets and don't understand really how much I think this is social and community driven. So hopefully they'll get something out of this and start following that as a path to understanding and making more money. So thank you for taking the time and for being here.
This is awesome, man. I really appreciate it, Scott.
Yeah. And now since you couldn't tell me like what's coming, we're going to have to do it again. In a few months, round 2.
We'll record it, and then you can release it on the day. How about that?
It'd be like Rocky and Apollo, Rocky 1 and Rocky 2.
Rocky 4 is my favorite.
Oh, I will break him. I must break him. If he dies, he dies. Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies. My dogs were always named after Rocky characters when we were kids. So Rocky was like one of them, and we had a Clubber from Rocky 3. I don't think we ever had a Drago, but I did have a friend with that nickname. It's awesome. All right, thank you, man.
That's dope.